Okay, hi everyone. Trust everybody's keeping well. Welcome again. I think we're on number 5 of the variant webinars. Quite sure it's not going to be our last. I think maybe what we should do soon is we'll have a webinar about nothing to do with COVID at all, or maybe nothing to do with microbiology at all, and we can all just chill out for a bit. Okay, so today, very pleased that we've got Jonathan Turner, who I'm sure needs no introduction at all to any of you, Head of Technical Services, PHC Southwest, and of course, Charlotte Duncan, Charlie, in the corner there, who I think you all know as well. Both taking time out of pretty hectic schedules, of course, as I know everybody is. So thank you for that, and hopefully you're going to appreciate everything that we've got to say to you. Important subject, of course, the matter of variants at the moment. We engaged with PHE at quite an early stage when we got the calls to discuss the possibility of developing a kit with our partners Certest in Zaragoza in Spain. Bit of a tight timeline to do so. I don't know that I've ever seen a company make a kit so fast, but they did. We got the format sorted out, what was needed, concentrating initially on the 4 key variants: Kent, Bristol, South Africa and Brazil. There was also a lot of work still going on behind the scenes with Charlie and Certest working with PHE again for the next one, true multiplex again in bulk format, bulk tube format, that you guys, those that use Certest will be very familiar with. The kit is ready. We were fortunate enough to be able to work very close with PHE and also all the individual labs who completed the expression of interest. And of course, then those labs that were, I was going to say identified, invited to, or maybe in some cases press ganged into being central testing sites. One not too far up here on the M6. It's Paul here, possibly somewhere. No, Paul not with us today. Okay, he's done a couple of them though. But they now have their kits, so the evaluations are starting. We have our first batch will be rolling out for us on Friday. And what we will be doing, like we do with a lot of these urgent deliveries, is not trusting anybody like UPS or TNT or Parcel Force to lose them. So it will be our drivers that will be dispatched from here on Monday to get all those to you. I'm not going to do the technical stuff. I'm going to leave that to these 2 speakers here. So questions wise, there is a chat room function. Okay, so please, anything you want to put into the chat room can go into there. Everybody will see that. So at the end of each session, we can just address those questions straight away. If for some reason you do feel the need to ask one urgently, you can activate your own cameras and microphones. Put your hand up, all of those wonderful features that we have on these many platforms that we use. If we're just in listening mode, if we keep microphones off, it keeps the bandwidth down and stops everything crashing and carry down the way they're in marketing having a fit. So that's it really. So Jonathan, good to see you again. It's been a long time, about 4 hours probably. So if you want to knock your mic off, and I shall leave you to it, sir.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for inviting me. I'm just checking that that you can hear me okay. Is that all working? And unfortunately, I can see that the camera is working, and it's really good to be talking to colleagues today. I'm lining up several talks at the moment, and actually coming here today reminds me of the importance of returning to business as usual. And I'm very much like the rest of you, I suspect, on this call, looking forward where we can to return back to our laboratories and our diagnostic activities to something like business as usual. But that's only where the efforts of the combined resources of our research colleagues, of our diagnostic, commercial and supplier companies and the laboratories are all working together to support public health microbiology. And one of my missions in life, of course, is to bang the drum for public health microbiology. And it does seem that there's an awful lot of public health microbiologists now across the piece. So it's great to be able to talk to you all this afternoon and talk about variants of concern and try and explain why we're doing what we're doing, and a quick insight into the validation of one of the kits that is being looked at across the piece at the moment. So I'm just going to bring up my my slides if I can. So we practiced this earlier, so I'm hoping that it all goes well. I know Charlotte and colleagues will be fingers crossed that I pick up the right piece. So I'm hoping that you can see my slides, can you? Now, the challenge that I've got is that I can't see my slides at the moment, Charlotte, which is a bit of a concern. So I'm going to stop sharing and think of doing something slightly different if I can. Just bear with me. So I'm trying to go back to the main slide. I might need you to help me at this point. If I go to this, right, I'm going to try and stop sharing, and I can't actually get to a screen which is allowing me to do that at the moment. So.
Don't now, John. You're making me nervous when I have to do mine.
Right. Harry, are you there? Can you guides?
I've got
Jonathan.
Right. Here we go. Good. Right, here we go. So if I share my screen again, and I will go with so what have we got? No. Okay, Charlotte, would it be worthwhile you doing your presentation first while I try and sort this out? Because at the moment I'm not getting to a point where I've got the slides in front of me, unfortunately. All I've got is you guys, which is a bit of a shame since we rehearsed this so carefully earlier.
Best laid plans.
All adds to the spice of a webinar.
Actually, I can see the slides now. Can you see the slides?
No.
No.
No. Well, that's less than useful, isn't it? What can you see at the moment?
Just the main screen with everybody.
Okay. Let's try this again then. We may have a way forward here. So share screen. Here we go. What have you got now?
We have your presentation.
Good. Is it in a good place? Is it just one slide?
Yeah, you're good. Yep.
Okay. Well, I do apologise for that, everyone. I think it's a change of rooms and IT setup has caused the problem. There we go. Good. Okay. So yes, I'm going to reflect on the Bristol experience over the last few weeks and give a little bit of background, if I can, as to why we're working in the way that we are. And I've stolen the slides quite unashamedly from Dr. Barry Vipond, who has been rolling out the assays in Bristol, and from colleagues in the outbreak surveillance team who have given us the why and the what for of what we're doing. And I really want to formally recognise right at the start of this presentation that I'm not advocating any particular assay over another. There's a robust real world evaluation going on over the next, I think it's 3 months, Mark and Charlotte, of a range of assays, and Bristol
3 months, I believe. Yeah.
And Bristol is a small part of that, and I'm going to reflect on some of the very exciting findings that we've already had there, recognizing this is a rapidly changing and developing field, and targets that we're looking at today could well change. And that absolute gentle reminder to everyone that sequencing is the gold standard when it comes to identifying mutations and variants of concern out there. And whilst reflex assay typing is a useful tool, the sequencing stands as the most important piece. So why are we worried, and why are we concerned? Well, I clearly need to state that as the viruses evolve and mutations occur, we are concerned. Obviously, there is potential for vaccine efficacy to be compromised. We may see, and we have seen, increased transmissibility of the virus. And indeed, we could eventually see increased pathogenicity and mortality and other compromising morbidities and things that could impact on patients. So monitoring those is really important, but actually reacting to outbreaks rapidly is, of course, a significant public health microbiology concern. And if I could just wind the clock back, and I was talking to Charlotte and colleagues the other day about trying to remember what was happening nationally at various points in the calendar. And you'll remember last October, November, as this slide demonstrates, we started to see an uptick in numbers, and we also noticed at that time an uptick in failure of assays that were targeting the S gene, or there were changes in results. And what was really helpful was that those were happening in real time, there and now, so we could monitor what was happening as these numbers were upticking, and this new mutation was clearly causing a problem. You'll remember the tier structure was in place around then, and we were moving various parts of the country into various tiers because of the increased numbers that were ticking up in various parts of the country associated with this outbreak. And then, of course, we eventually hit that Christmas time, just after Christmas time, lockdown that we've seen and we're working our way out of now. The important piece being really was, of course, that early identification of a problem means we can get on with some public health microbiology action very, very quickly. And as this slide is trying to highlight, is that whilst sequencing it gives us the absolute warts and all, the likelihood of vaccine being compromised, the likelihood of an assay not working in the future, whatever it might be, it takes time. It takes 14 days. There are quicker sequencing routes out there, I know. But essentially, that real-time perspective that the S gene dropout was giving us was quite useful. Is there a different way? And Mark has suggested that commercial companies were reached out to early doors of doing some sort of reflex PCR type assay, which could give us an indication that there might be a problem, so we can initiate, notice the word might be able to initiate a public health type response quickly whilst we wait for the sequencing to come through. So we need to establish what assays may or may not work and how useful they could be, and really look at the concordance of the reflex assay results with their likelihood of indicating correctly what mutations and variants might be present. So there's going to be a ream of data coming off as we look at these assays and how they're performing then against sequencing. All sorts of words being bandied around: variants of concern, the variants that are under investigation, and mutations of concern. So there are working groups within the government that are looking at the variants of concern, the variants under investigation. The VAM task force, the variant mutation task force, is constantly looking at that and reviewing the data that colleagues are producing. And there are various technical coordination groups that work within that. When assessing the profiles of these organisms and the implications of these new variants, we then need to assign a public health management level to that early result. Well, actually, we've got this profile. What does that mean from a public health management perspective? And so we need to put those profiles into a into a management level, and then the appropriate public health management could follow whilst we whilst we wait for sequencing. I guess we just need to reflect on the targets. We've obviously got to all be aiming for the right targets and coordinate that appropriately. And I could hear you cry, well, why not stick with the S gene? Well, the S gene dropout actually wasn't available in all assays. It was an accident of some, a very useful accident by proxy, of course, but it wouldn't help us detect the South African or the Brazilian variants. And there's probably, by and large, only enough specimen when we're working all the demands through for testing to actually hit 4 target assays anyway, by and large. So we do need to be a bit selective. So we need to think out, well, what do we get best bang for our buck for public health or clinical impact? We've got to be able to decide which targets to drop off and to swap in with the new ones, and then as has already been suggested by Mark, horizon scan, so we can give companies a heads up of what assays and targets we need them to be developing. And of course, UK HSA, new mouthful I'm having to get used to, will be monitoring these variants of interest and advising colleagues appropriately. There's an awful lot of stakeholders that need to be involved in that across the 4 nations, the commercial sector, the laboratories, the manufacturers. There's an awful lot of people that need to be involved in that decision making. And the horizon scanning really needs to be made very clear to manufacturers. Mutations of concern is a term that you'd be banded about, and clearly the E484K is the main one of concern at the moment, but certainly the E48K is the one that is prompting and kicking off various public health actions that you will have seen probably daily in the news now, with surge capacity, increased testing, and so on and so forth, that you can see. So what do those public health management levels look like? Well, this is an example of the proposed levels that we're seeing. So there's level 1 is where actually there is no further public health measures really required, other than the standard monitoring of a virus like this that is required. Level 2 is where it would be enhanced. So this is where test and trace would get involved and would want to interview the patient, work out who the local contacts were. And actually, if we started to see a lump of clusters in a particular area, or something starts to get linked through that test and trace follow-up that colleagues would have done, then there's likely to be an incident management team stood up. And depending the environment that we're dealing with, that could involve the local authority, it could involve local health protection teams and directors of public health, potentially laboratory or clinical microbiology staff, local authority people coming in to help manage something around a particular cluster. And then level 3, which is something you might see with the Brazilian variants, for example, is where the health protection team will get involved with those enhanced questionnaires that they do, and they'll be working out where you've been, when, who you've been in contact with, and all of that sort of thing. And there's likely to be an entire incident management team stood up just for the isolating one of those. And indeed, there will be some work done to risk assess if there is the need to stand up that massive surge testing response that I'm sure you're all very, very familiar with. So moving sort of on to the Bristol piece, that slide appeared a lot quicker than I was expecting, but there we are. So within the Bristol laboratory, the process is that we're screening on our Panther TMAs. We don't get an L08 then. We're using the Panther lysate. We found is perfectly acceptable to move forward to our reflex assay. That is going through our Kingfishers. 96 samples can be done in about 30 minutes. The PCR is then set up on our QIAgilities, and amplification is done on our quant studios. What we get from our machines is a readout that looks something similar. So this is the sort of the discrimination plot. So we're running against 4 targets at the moment. As it comes off the analysis software, you can see what we've got on the, let's get this around the right way, the y-axis there is a cluster of the sort of mutant samples, and then right over on the right on the x-axis is a normal wild type, and you've got a control down the bottom there, and an isolate, unfortunately, that didn't amplify. So that was looking at the 501 target. E484, which is the mutation I talked about earlier, which is present in the Bristol variant. Yeah, we've got our very own one in Bristol, not to be outdone by South Africa or Brazil. They will share the E484K, and what you can see on this plot is those two isolates there on the y-axis against the E484K mutant strain, and we've got the normal types on the bottom x-axis there. And I just wanted to share this slide with you, because I think of all the slides, this is possibly my most interesting one, and the reason why I'm so pleased that I'm able to talk with you today and advocate reflex assay testing, Mark, is we identified through the validation that we're still running two patients in outpatients, a mother and a daughter, who were carrying, completely unbeknown to us and for no explicable reason, or initially anyway, the South African variant, and these were pre-ops. It's not expected, and we were able to get on and deal with that very, very quickly, sort of demonstrating the utility, certainly to me, very, very quickly. And then there was a momentary bit of excitement in the laboratory, and I'm sure lab colleagues will know the excitement that you find when you've got something interesting or really, really significant in your hands. And lo and behold, one day we identified a series of results which were very suggestive of the Brazilian variant being present. So there was some excited attempts to report these through. And lo and behold, what had happened is, and it became very clear, is these were expected by our health protection colleagues. They were managing a cargo vessel which had come from South America. The crew were poorly, and there was a suspicion this was going to be a likely result. Now, actually, it was very helpful having this early days. They didn't have to wait to confirm what was going on. But yes, identifying those patients early doors was quite exciting for us, and reassurance that the assay was working well. And I can confirm that sequencing, I confirmed 7 out of the 8 cases as being the Brazilian strain, and the one that didn't sequence was a failure to sequence. It wasn't a failure of that we'd falsely picked something up. And then, of course, the question is what's next, and it's really important that we remember these assays will need to be flexible. The situation in India is very present in all of our minds at the moment, and equally the variants that have been detected around the UK that are suggestive of an Indian variant. The question will be, do we need to move forward with looking for new markers? Do we need to drop one of the other target assays? But will that compromise sensitivity and specificity of the assay? So all of that has to be worked through, and there will need to be a group change if that's the case. And I mentioned the processes that are in place to make sure that happens in a healthy and responsible fashion. Yes, so Reflex assays, rapid and appear to be robust from our early data. They're going to give us some flexibility because we can drop in and out those SNPs as necessary, and you appear to be able to do quite large numbers through this laboratory workflow. We are gaining more and more epidemiological confidence about calling these variants as we move forward, because we're getting more and more data, and I'm sure more is going to come out of the real world evaluation as we move forward. But the big lesson from me certainly is making sure that we've standardized our reporting processes and getting notification out to all stakeholders about what is happening and how to interpret. And it's always difficult when you're in an assay validation. I absolutely get that. But the big message from me really is we do need to get very robust comms out when we go live with these things, so that all partners are able to understand, interpret, and act on the results. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Jonathan. Thank you. So just had a little look in the chat room there. We can take some questions if anybody wants to just jump straight away. Oh, there we go. Have we got that one, Jonathan, from Penny?
Let's have a look. So the answer, just trying to read all of that there. I can't give you the volumes. I can come back. I can come back to you. But we have acceptable. The assay, Penny, has gone through full validation now with sensitivity and specificity data through scrutiny. And I can't give you that here and now. But yes, we did have good sensitivity promptly using those Panther lysate tubes, which is what I think you're referring to there. Is that what you're after?
You can come off mute if you want, Penny, if you have anything you want to come back on and with that. That was a question I was going to ask, actually, John, because I wasn't aware that you could use anything off the Panther for sort of extraction and amplification. So yeah, that's good to know.
So I think the caveat there is that was worked up in a time frame, if that makes sense. So it's about rapid movement of that from the Panther onwards is what we've identified.
I did just have one more question, if I may.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you can run it on a 384 well plate. So for the validation work, were you just putting positive samples through the genotyping, or were you doing everything through?
Through the validation, or as you'd imagine, there were negatives going through, there were positives going through, there were all sorts of challenges put to the, and there is a published to the NHS laboratories that are validating the other assays. There is a protocol which they're following, Charlotte.
Okay, does anybody else have anything for Jonathan before we move on? No, okay, I can't see any hands up. So, are you fixed, Charlie?
Yep.
Crack on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Better than me, I hope not, but anyway.
If everybody wants to wander off for 10 minutes while Charlie makes an attempt.
Oh, thanks.
Now.
Yeah, just go and make a cup of coffee or something. Yeah. Sorry, Jonathan.
Sorry, before we move on, I have got another question I've just thought of.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So, you said that in patients with prolonged shedding, you did see mixed genotypes. How would they behave in these different assays? And I guess it'd be different for the assay that you looked at compared to
So what's interesting? Yeah, absolutely. I can't go back, but I wanted to show that one of my slides. I was just rushed through, a bit nervous. Is there was a really interesting slide. One of those allelic plots shows something which we have proved is mixed. The patient has got, or the isolate has got both the wild and the mutation types sort of held in there. This mixed profile is something very possible. So therefore, that interim holding piece, that this is a provisional result awaiting sequencing, becomes really quite important. And then how do you handle that information in the interim?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, should I go ahead and share then? Okay. How does that look for everybody? Okay. Yeah.
Looking good, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think any of you who've been on the previous webinars will have likely seen this main title slide before. I think you'll see as we go through the presentation, I'm feeling more confident than ever that this is an appropriate title. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit to that. So I have updated some of the slides. Oh dear, I don't seem to be able to, let me stop that a second. I don't seem to be able to progress my presentation, sorry.
It's all right. Charlotte's just doing this, Mark, to make me feel so much so much better. And there was, while Charlotte's sorting,
she's good like that, Jonathan. Yeah,
that's all right. I mean, you'll mention that halfway through my presentation, I said, oh, I wasn't expecting that slide to come out, and there were a couple of slides that I was missed out on, and while Charlotte is attempting to fill on, I just reflect that this information is taken from the laboratories into a central. It's called the VAM list, variant and mutation list, whilst we wait for the sequencing result in SGSS to join it. But that data is used across the whole of government and within the local incident management teams to either effect a local incident management team response, or indeed in a bigger picture, a bit like we saw at Christmas time. Influence a sort of lockdown or a tiered response or whatever it might be, and looking at the efficiency of vaccines and so on and so forth. So really important and useful data is coming in. Did I feel well enough then, Charlotte? Or are you still struggling?
Well compared, thanks, John.
What a team. Yeah, everything is being recorded, by the way, guys, so we will release the recordings so you can revisit the science and watch these two clowns again try and do this. Sorry.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for that vote of confidence.
Yeah.
So this is the same slide as last time, but again, I think it's quite appropriate to talk to the level of attention that you get on the variants. I finally had my haircut yesterday, and it was all that the hairdresser and her previous client were talking about was the India variant. So, which leads me on to this, and I think we should just take a moment to appreciate the staggering increase in cases that's happening over there. Whether it's related to this double mutant, I'm not so sure. Whether it's related to the religious festivals and the political rallies that are going on, I think it's an important lesson that there's more to containing this than just testing and looking at mutations or variants. I think it's important to maintain the public health response, and this perhaps is a lesson as to what can happen if we don't. So, little bit doom and gloom, but yeah, it's not looking pretty over there. Okay, I've left this slide in again just in case anybody wasn't on the last webinar. I find it quite useful just to remember what we're talking about when we're talking about mutations. So we're literally talking about swapping out of an amino acid usually, or a deletion of an amino acid or an insertion of an amino acid. So I think probably the two that are most problematic in terms of viability of the virus is the deletion and insertion, because you end up with a frame shift occurring, which then obviously shoves everything downstream out of sync. And I think the impact of those particular types of mutations are a lot more pronounced. But if you have a look at, for example, the E484K, the N501Y, these are all just substitution mutations. And there are tables that you can get as to what the exact sort of the K, the Q, the R, what amino acids they stand for. And again, I quite like this slide because it really visualizes why we're interested in these particular mutations. So this is the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 beginning to bind with the human ACE2 receptor on the surface of a cell. So you can see that, for example, the N501Y, which is key for the Bristol variant, and the 6970 deletion as well, which is the Kent variant, and all of these sorts of ones that have been circulating in the UK, you can see that they very clearly affect the performance or the affinity or the biochemical structure of that particular spike protein and how it interacts with the ACE2 receptor, and essentially that's conferring greater infectivity on the virus. And again, this slide So this was the list of all of the mutations of interest. I think that this has probably been updated, but I don't have access to that sort of public health data currently. But I think, again, most of these are in the S gene, and you can see that it's only really the E4A4K mutation which affects, let's say, pathogenicity in terms of escape mutations. So almost all of the others are just all around increasing that binding affinity in the receptor binding domain and things with the ACE2 receptor. So, and again, this is going to be quite a, I suppose this is going to be quite a kit focus, so like a ViaSure kit focus presentation, but hopefully showing why we need to dig into the value of these mutations and what they actually mean. So if we take a look down, the main thing that I want to say on this is if you take a look at those mutations of interest, which potentially could be mandated for detection by public health, if you look at developing a kit, something like, for example, the Q498R is not necessarily a mutation that we'd want to waste a channel detecting, because it's an epistatic mutation. So I think it's important to keep a bit of perspective, a bit of common sense about how we're going about developing these kits and how to get, as you said in your previous presentation, John, the best bang for your buck. I think that's the most important thing. And challenges for variant detection kits. I must admit, when I first took on sort of liaising with colleagues about developing this kit and looking at how to do it, it was quite exciting, it was quite interesting. I'm a little bit sick of talking about it now, to be honest, and it just seems to be getting more and more complex and more of a challenge about how to best provide a solution in something that is just changing so quickly all the time. And again, I always like to point out that when you're looking at a diagnostic kit, there's always a trade-off in some way over what you're trying to do. So if we look, for example, at the TAC path assay, you have a huge list of mutations that you can detect, but they're all monoplex. So then if you're going to look at things like efficiency of workflow, burden on the NHS laboratories, all of these type of factors that you have to consider rather than just the pure science of what we want to look for, you do have to sort of trade off a little bit. So if you're looking at something like a multiplex kit, you have 4 channels, you need to be a bit careful about which ones you pick. And you do have to be mindful that it might not be the prettiest assay in comparison to a monoplex. So, that's just always something I like to put out there. And again, the challenges, and this has become particularly apparent, as you'll see as the slides go on, with the latest technical report on the .gov website. So we've developed the ViaSure variant kit as it stands, which has the 4 mutations of interest, which are E484K, K417N and K417T, and N501Y. And I think you'll see it's quite an interesting comparison, actually, from the analysis I did in March compared to the analysis I did, I think, back end of last week on how well that kit currently performs with the hugely expanded list of VOX, VUIs, and MOX or monitoring variants. And I think, it's just, I think, again, it's always worth mentioning that information's key when it comes to responding to a situation like this. And again, I don't have the answer to it, but the more information that we can get from PHE and from government to respond to the requirements as the situation changes, then the better, I think, for all of us. So the ViaSure kit options that are available currently, we have a standard SARS-CoV-2 wild type kit, which does ORF 1A, B, and N in accordance with the China CDC protocol published on the WHO website. There's a lot of acronyms, sorry. It also has RNase P as an endogenous control, and then we have the S gene dropout. Just to give, it's almost like they've developed a kit equivalent to the S gene target failure kit with the TAC path assay. So it just gives you that indication that you're probably dealing with a Kent variant if you get failure in FAM, but ROX and Cy5 are coming up. And then this is the kit that we've released, I think, as of last week, which is the variant kit for E4A4K, K417T, N501Y, K417N. So I'm just going to show the analyses that we do. This is what I'm trying to put together. And again, I'm happy to share all of this information with people. I'm pulling these mutations, these key defining mutations, from the reports detailed in the website link at the bottom of the slide. And what I'm essentially trying to do is to say, with our kit, if you were to do a reflex test, what level of information can we provide based on the current published information? So this was the report that was published, I think it's technical report number 7 on the 11th of March. So you can see that anything in green is we're quite comfortable, so we can detect it and we can individually report it as that particular variant. So when we first started discussing the kit, we could detect and report the Kent variant, South Africa, the P1 Brazil, and the Bristol variant. And then the only thing that we couldn't do was to differentiate P2, the Liverpool and the Nigeria variants. We could detect them, but we couldn't say which one it was out of those three. And then if you move on to technical report number 9, which was published on the 22nd of April, I've had to split it now into each slide, so that the first slide is the VOX, second slide is the VUIs, and the third slide is the monitoring, because there's too many to squish onto a slide. So you can see that with our current kit, we've now lost the ability to detect and differentiate the Kent variant. So we can still detect it, but it reports the same result as one of the other variants, which is highlighted in blue, which I'll show you in a second, and similarly with the Bristol variant. So we can no longer differentiate these particular variants. And if we have a look at the VUIs, so all of those 4 listed there will be reported with the same result, which is all positive in FAM with nothing else coming up positive. And then with the, I think the pink was the Bristol. Yeah, with the Bristol variant, we now have some overlap with the 2 VUIs that were published in March, so March 01 and March 02. And then we actually can't detect the India variant with this particular kit. So you can see that it's starting to become a little more complicated on how we use a variant genotyping kit and what value the information has. And again, moving on to the monitoring variants. So the California one we can't detect because none of the key mutations are in our 4-channel multiplex. And then with the Kent variant, we have these other 2 monitoring, which have the S494P and Q677H mutation. Can't differentiate those from the standard Kent variant. So you can see, you know, the analysis is becoming slightly more complex as more and more information is coming around. One thing I would like to note as well, that given this information is what we're pretty much working from in the public domain, it becomes quite difficult when you look at, for example, A27, the French variant. There's no defining mutations listed on the technical report. So I have no idea how the kit's going to perform with that. I think that's something that maybe Certest can help out with, but you know, there's some pretty big gaps if you look down the table here. So that's where we stand at the moment with the current kit. We are looking at how we can address this, hopefully within the next month, but that's really dependent on how much input we get on which mutations we need to look to. So this is a summary of all of the VOX, the VUIs, and the monitoring samples. The green is good, we can differentiate. Everything else, you've got overlap, or anything that's not highlighted, we actually don't know how the kit's going to respond. So we are looking now at a possible second multiplex kit. So this would take the full ViaSure complement of genotyping kits to 2 tubes, so a 2-well assay to target 8 mutations in total. Now, again, I would encourage anybody who's got feedback. I think Paul is on the call, actually, Paul Wilkinson from Preston. I know he did have some feedback about how he'd be guided on choice of mutation. But if anybody has any feedback on that, it would be very, very welcome at this point before we go ahead and start designing a kit and ordering all of the controls to begin the development work. So the reason that we've chosen these 4, so we've gone for E484Q, P681R, the 6970 deletion, assuming that you're not running necessarily the TAC path assay. This is for people who are perhaps running Panther or your Oz Diagnostics, any of your standard COVID kits that don't have the S gene dropout. And then L452R. Now, the reason that we've done that is it's to try and get as much differentiation of the variants that we believe are going to be of most interest. So, you know, we could potentially change that to target, I don't know, that R1 variant, but you know, how much are we likely to see here? This is where the epidemiology really comes into play. And with that second tube multiplex, you can see how much more green we've got on that differentiation panel there. So we go back to being able to split out the Bristol variant. We can now detect the India and the California variants. The Belo Horizonte variant, not sure how much of that there is around. I think that was just a bit of a, because we've got the E484Q gene in there, mutation in there. So we still can't split out Kent, because in order to do that with those 2 samples that are being monitored, we're going to have to add in those other 2 mutations. I'm not sure, again, how important that is from a public health or an epidemiology perspective. But this is what we're thinking currently. And again, I've broken it down. You can see, I'll skip through these, but this is the breakdown of the VOX, the VUIs, and the monitoring. So you can see the report out of the channels based on that. So I'm not going to talk anything more about the kit per se, but what I do want to talk about is the rollout in the NHS, and it's my last slide, so I'm hoping it's going to be a bit of a discussion point along with this second potential kit. So what I've done is to just list on the slide the NHS, essentially the NHS laboratories that are doing the 3-month real-world trial that's being rolled out with a go-live date of I think it's the 14th of May. Good luck, everybody. And I just thought it would be quite useful. We did have a couple of user group meetings the back end of last week, just to talk with those colleagues who were interested in using the ViaSure kit for this 3-month trial. So you can see everybody highlighted in green has at least expressed some kind of interest in the kit. So you know, if anybody wants to join any of those user group meetings, there will be invites sent out. Just get in touch with, you know, any of the team, myself or our UK support email address, and we can certainly get you an invite onto that. And then just worth highlighting that the Royal Preston Hospital is confirmed as the national validation site, meaning that in theory, all of the other sites should be able to perform a verification once that kit's been fully validated at that one location, I believe with support from PHE and Porton Down and people like that. So, and we do have Cambridge looking at the kit as well, just as an aside. So I think that's me. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Charlie. Paul, can I invite you to maybe make a couple of comments on behalf of Preston for us?
Oh, you put him on the spot again.
Yeah. You there, Paul?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just struggling a bit with Zoom. I don't even know how I get back to.
There you are. Okay. Hi. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. I must say, in terms of the number of new variants that are going to, of new mutations to look for, I'm pretty much guided by the slides I've just seen, to be honest. I did have a few thoughts based off the published guidance from PHE, and I sort of fed that back to Charlie earlier on in the week. But otherwise, I really don't sort of claim to have any great sort of expertise in the area, really. I'm just more thinking it more from a practical point of view in terms of how sort of labs might roll it out. I suppose another way of thinking about it might be stratification. Or should we just be looking for things which are out of the ordinary? If we can see what's the norm, maybe it's just a way of sort of trying to out of the norm. That might be useful for fast tracking for sequencing. Because I think that one of the problems at the moment is that with relatively small numbers coming through, we only send them off once a week for sequencing, and that obviously introduces a delay. But I don't think it takes too long to actually produce the sequence. It's the kind of logistics and the batching of it that might cause that. So maybe we should be looking at things which are out of the ordinary, sort of epidemiologically unusual markers as a way of stratifying that. As for the verification, we have the PHE document, which Jonathan alluded to, and it's just a question of sourcing the material, which I believe we're getting some from PHE and some of its nibs, and there's quite a detailed program for how we do that. We're just kind of following the advice on that. I think that the problem, and it's been expressed by lots of other labs, is just getting hold of material that's not your standard 1.1.7s, which is circulated frequently. Just trying to find material, actual real life material that isn't just the normal predominant strain. But once we have that, then it would be this question of going ahead and doing dilution studies, for sensitivity, specificity, and using the verification panels that have been recommended. So it's a bit of work to do, but it's fairly kind of straightforward. We're not having to make it up as going along. We're guided by the PHE document on that.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
Paul. There is a question in from Lucy. Somebody wants to take that? Do you want to take that one, Jonathan?
Yeah, I can do, Mark. Yeah, it's a point well made. Lucy and the National Incident Director, commented on that in a call the other day, and at the moment we're understanding the implications of what would happen to sensitivity and specificity if we remove the 501 and put something else in its place. So the value at the moment is actually pulling in some comparable data. So all of the assays that are coming in at the moment are not changing those. So there's merit in getting a robust data set. I would suggest at the moment. However, it's fair to say there is a lot of consideration going on about next steps and what we should look at. And I just wanted to echo Paul's comment. This virus has taught us one thing, and that is the time for all of us in the scientific, diagnostic and medical community to think outside the box. And if there is something unusual going on, expedite that sequencing to the best of your ability, because you're absolutely right. That's where we find the interesting challenges and things that are a bit different, and the variants and the mutants that are going on. I just wondered if it was worthwhile reflecting on reporting as it's been established at the moment. And I think when we are talking about reporting, we probably ought to think about what is it you're telling PHE as a laboratory, and what is it you're telling the patient the patient management team, and that's all being worked up a great very earnestly at the moment. But it's certainly from the Bristol and Manchester teams that have been, if you like, guinea pigs moving forward from a clinical diagnostic lab perspective. We're reporting up to via Datamart to SGSS wild type mutation mixed, going back to that earlier call, and no amplification against those 4 targets that we've discussed today. So that's I think there's a combination of one in, it's like 16 bits of info that are potentially being upset into the beast. The reporting back piece hasn't been clarified. Now there are a series of meetings that I've been to, the ongoing, some more at the end of this week and early next week, to give some guidance to laboratories about what to report back. I've seen at least one report. I think it was the Glasgow laboratory which reported something along the lines of a clinical comment. I think it looked like the presence of an E48K mutation on this patient sample has been identified. We are awaiting further information, and this information is for epidemiological and public health management purposes only, because I think these assays are research only for public health information as opposed to clinical management, which is probably an important point to reflect on, isn't it? That's all I wanted to mention, Mark.
Okay, right. Well, I don't have anything else in the chat. What was that? Oh, that was nothing. Have your hands up. Does anybody have any other questions or anything they want to raise? I mean, obviously, as Charlie said, if anybody wants more information, wants to talk to us, please just give us a call. I think you're all more than familiar with your own territory managers from ProLab. Give them a call. They're all online here. You've been talking quite a lot, I think, over the last few months anyway. And Charlie's always here if you need to talk to her. So if I don't see anything else coming up there, obviously, thank you very much, Jonathan, once again, and Charlie, for updating everybody. We will be doing another one. I don't know when. I've got no idea. You got any idea, Charlie, when the next one would be due? Maybe on the second variant kit, when we've got something to share?
Yeah, or perhaps when we've got some data on the first one.
Yeah, okay. Okay, guys, well, thanks again. We're here if you need us. Catch up with
Thanks
you all
very
very
much.
soon.
Thank you for
Okay.
inviting me, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye now.
absolute pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you. Cheers, Charlie.
Bye.